Hello and welcome to another Object Talk. My name is Eliana and I am a member of the learning team at the Jewish Museum. Today you are joining us for an Object Talk on an early 20th century Koshering board. This object is one of over 40,000 objects in the Jewish Museum London's designated collection that shows the diversity of Jewish life and history, and our programs exist to explore the connections between faiths and cultures. I'm going to share my screen so that you can see the object in more detail. This week is the festival of Shavuot. It starts on Thursday evening. And Shavuot celebrates the giving of the Torah to Moses on Mount Sinai, along with all of the 613 commandments and laws that it contains. This includes the Kashrut laws, the Jewish food laws of what Jewish people can eat, which we call kosher food, and what Jewish people can't eat, which we call treif. Plus, it tells us how to prepare certain foods, such as meat, so that it is fit for consumption, or kosher. On this theme, we have chosen to talk about a koshering board, as you can see on the slide. And this is from our collection, and it dates back to early 20th century, specifically to the date 1905. Now, I just want to warn any vegan or vegetarian audience members, because I will be talking about the koshering process of meat a little bit later on in this object talk. This wooden slanted koshering board dates back to 1905, as I mentioned earlier, and it belonged to Jewish immigrants who lived in the East End of London. Between 1880 and 1914, there was a large influx of Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe to Britain. In fact, as much as 3 million Jewish people left Eastern Europe and made their way to the USA, Canada, South Africa, France, Argentina, and the UK. This movement is often called the Great Migration. By 1900, Jewish people formed around 95% of the population in the Wentworth Street district of Spitalfields. And a large Jewish immigrant population brought with them a rich religious and cultural life, which was reflected in the food, the language, and the leisure time. Many, but not all, of these Jewish immigrants spoke Yiddish. And therefore, Yiddish literature, periodicals, and theatre flourished during this time. Now let's look closely at the object. When we look at this object, we can see a wooden tray with 5 raised sides. Beneath one end is a rectangular piece of wood which raises the tray so that it slopes at an angle. At the other end is a gap between 2 of the raised sides, and these 2 raised sides are at an angle to form a funnel. This wooden slanted koshering board, as I mentioned earlier, dates back to 1905, and it was given as a wedding present to Jewish immigrants who came from Poland. And they married in Great Alley Street Synagogue, and they lived in New Road in the East End of London. The donor's father came to Britain when he was 17, and her mother came aged 13. Now, we don't really know a whole lot else about the people who owned this particular object. But we do know, however, that this item would have been common in many Jewish households at this time because it was an object that was used during the koshering process of meat. We can see that it was made for this specific part of this specific process because it is slanted. And it tells us that the part of removing blood from meat would have been the purpose of this piece of equipment. At this time, the context in which people would own these koshering boards, kosher butchers would not have carried out the koshering process like nowadays. They would simply slaughter the animal according to Jewish law, or shechita, and then sell the cuts of meat. The process of koshering meat in Judaism comes from the Kashrut laws found in the Torah, as I mentioned earlier. In fact, there's a specific law in which the consumption of blood is forbidden. It says, "You shall not eat any blood, whether that of fowl or of beast, in any of your dwellings." And this is from Leviticus 7:26. The reason for this is because blood is considered the life force of an animal, and out of respect, we are not permitted to consume it. As well as the animal having to be kosher to begin with, the laws of which are in the Torah, and also be slaughtered in a certain way, all the blood must be drained from it before consumption. This means that there are rigorous processes of removing the blood from a cut of meat. The two accepted methods of doing this is through either salting or broiling. The meat should be raw for it to be koshered. Now, the salting method. Meat must first be soaked in half an hour in cool water in a utensil designated exclusively for that purpose. After allowing for excess water to drip off the meat is then thoroughly salted so that the entire surface is covered with a thin layer of salt. Only coarse salt should be used. This is the point where the meat will be left for an hour on an inclined or perforated surface to allow the blood to flow down freely. And so this is the point in the koshering process where this koshering board would have been used. Now, the complete koshering process should take place within 72 hours of the animal being killed. Many of the Jewish immigrants that came over from Eastern Europe would have been fairly observant of Jewish law, as was common back in the old country. Hence why this object may have been used by lots of Jewish families at this time. This very plain wooden object signifies a tradition passed down through generations and reminds me of the importance of the home in Judaism as a constant. It also highlights the progress of new technologies to carry on old traditions, as we wouldn't use wooden boards like this anymore, but we would buy already koshered meat from kosher butchers. Now, I have a question for you. Do you have any objects in your home that are linked to a tradition, either religious, cultural, friendship, or family related? We'd love to hear from you. So if you would like to, please do just comment in the box below this video. We'd love to hear from you. Now, I'd like to thank you for joining us for this object talk. Please do join us next week where my colleague Shireen will be talking about a photograph from the early 20th century of a JFS playground. I'd like to wish you all Chag Sameach for Shavuot for Thursday evening. Goodbye for now.